Welcome to the Kintsugi Heroes podcast, where we share inspirational stories of everyday people going through different challenges and how they overcome them. Please be aware that the story you're about to hear may have moments of deeply felt emotions and personal experiences. If anything you hear has a triggering effect, please reach out to someone who can help keep you safe. If you love this conversation, we'd love you to like and share it with your friends so we can continue to share more inspiration and hope to as many people as possible. Now, listen up for our next hero story. Today's episode is with the lovely Luke Marshall. This was a very deep conversation, I guess. It was vulnerable, it was raw, and he shared a lot of things that I'm sure at one point, well, for a long time, would have been quite difficult to share. He talks of the early years of that caused the trauma, and it all stemmed from trauma that saw him go through a lot of issues and challenges through as an adult, perfectionism, drug and alcohol abuse, mental illness. He had a very painful run-in with the law that he talks about and openly talks about, and hospitalization. It's been a challenging journey for him, and yet he's just got the most beautiful smile. He radiates the joy and gratitude of a life that he's created. Today, he's sober, 2.5 years of sobriety. He's got a successful career, and he supports others. He's a mental health advocate and a father-to-be. So at the time of this publishing, he most likely will be a father. It was a wonderful story. I am really grateful to Luke for sharing so openly as he did, and I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. It's Luke Marshall. Hello, here we are. Welcome, Luke, to Kintsugi Heroes. It's so lovely to have you here.
Hey, Evelyn. Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
You're welcome. And this is obviously a conversation, but it's really about you and your story. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for coming. Thank you for being willing and open to sharing your story. It takes an amount of bravery and courage to do that. And I just want to honour you for doing that first up.
Thanks very much. That's kind of you to say.
You're welcome. Well, let's get started. Take us back. Where does your story begin? If you take us back to the beginning, tell me about the context, what was going on for you in life at the beginning, and then what happened?
Yeah, I think the best way for me to answer this and start is at age 20. I was onto my second degree. I'd relocated interstate from Victoria to Western Australia to study postgraduate law. And the world was my oyster. I was very excited to sort of begin life as an adult. And I'd say the best laid plans didn't work at all. In fact, it was a horrific, terrifying experience about 8 to 12 weeks later. And my study suffered completely. I ended up lapsing from mania, where I couldn't sleep and was getting progressively more and more excitable to a fault, into something known as psychosis. And, was on a road trip with friends up the West Australian coast, drinking, partying, not much sleep, and lost touch with reality, unfortunately. And with that experience came complete confusion, disarray, and saw me strip naked and break into a house and looking for my ex-girlfriend. No surprises there. She wasn't in that home. And unfortunately, it was poor elderly person that met me with shock and surprise. And then, recovering from that experience was intense. I was arrested, sent into a forensic hospital, and was there for 3 months as I was very unwell and later diagnosed with bipolar and psychosis. And so that was the adversity that was most obvious at time. I think there was some build up to that from early childhood, and then recovering from that wasn't a straightforward recovery either.
I want to ask you, was there any signs before that event of breaking into the house of the psychosis? Like, did you have any conscious awareness of where you were headed or why?
It's a good question. And I think 20 years ago, awareness of mental health was a lot less. It certainly was for me. I grew up in a regional town. And so being away from sort of certain cues made it really hard to reality check and sense check what was going on. In some ways, it was the perfect storm. I'd relocated from my friends and family to another state. I was living on campus in a residence with new people, and things I'm very aware of looking at or looking out for now, like sleeplessness and sort of hyperactivity. I just didn't know back then. And so, with the benefit of hindsight, that the cues and tells were there, but in sort of measuring the aftermath, it was actually pretty sudden because awareness of sort of what to look for in the lead up to such an event was really low. And it was a pretty sudden departure from reality, if I'm honest, which we could only sort of repiece and sort of relook at after um, a bit more trauma work and sort of understanding of what happened. And that trauma work, led me to even a few years ago, we were still putting the pieces together to sort of figure out what happened and how I can live better.
Yeah, it's certainly a journey, isn't it? It's not like a click of the fingers or take a pill or do this one step and you'll be fine. With the event you had, you were out with your friends drinking, and then you ended up at this elderly person's house. Can you take me through that? Were you on your own? Was it just you going into the house? How did that person, the elderly person, respond to you? What was the process? What the steps around that?
The detail, yeah, it's quite bemusing, I would say, in that the my recollection of events at the time was fairly sound despite that detachment from what was going on. And so we were playing drinking games with some friends at a campsite late into the evening. And unsurprisingly, because of the things I mentioned earlier, I was the last one to bed. And I remember sort of people drifting off and going to sleep and me grabbing a pillow and wandering down to the beach side to sort of just have a look at the stars and figure things out. I think the figuring things out was probably the beginning of the unraveling. I had a lot of racing thoughts. I could feel this really euphoric pressure in my chest and almost elation at sort of what was happening to me. And I, started thinking that I had, spiritual powers. I thought I had the power of God. It was really becoming evident that things were very unreal. And I thought I'd test these powers. So I remember stripping down and swimming off the shore and not getting very far because at the time I wasn't a very good swimmer. And something twigged and I came back to the shore, but you know, flights of fancy. My father died when I was 4 years old, and I thought I could see him on the beach at that time and went looking for him. And then it occurred to me that I should get back together with my ex-girlfriend. And so went looking for her while naked and walked off the beach and onto the street. And the house that presented itself looked like some sort of test. I thought I could pass this test by, performing athletic gestures. And I think at the time I managed to get the door open by ringing the bell and smashing a window. And unfortunately, the door was opened by this poor elderly person who was terrified. Um, and I thought was my ex-girlfriend in disguise. It was really, really hard. And this poor person said, get away, and had a hammer in their hand and swung at me and connected, but I wasn't really feeling anything at that point. And I think the blessing in disguise here was that it caused so much noise and it was so evident that something was extremely wrong that the neighbors heard and were able to tie me up, to a Jeep and wait for the police to come. And, reflecting on that incident isn't easy, but I think there are many stages sort of in this really troublesome night where I'm extremely lucky it wasn't worse. Like I could have drowned, I could have seriously hurt someone else. I'm very fortunate to be where I am today.
How did you, so at what point did you have sort of awareness, or is it still kind of pieces of the night? Like, are there parts of it that you still can't recollect?
I think in terms of the recollection of the night, I don't think there's blurs. I'm more than sure that my reality of that night is very different to perhaps what an outsider would have seen. And I think it took some time, post sort of arrest and integration into the hospital to piece together what had happened, because while I was up here with, you know, psychosis, I was still very manic once the psychosis had subsided and needed some very strong medication and supports to even be able to come back down to not bouncing off the ceiling. And so awareness pieced together, it took a long time to sort of piece it together into the coherent, cogent narrative that I shared with you today. And a lot of healing work. I think there was a certain amount of shame that I carried with this. On paper, it was a clear, identifiable mental health incident, but the reality is, you've got to learn all these new things, what triggers are, how to get comfortable talking about it, um, how to talk about it in a way that's sensitive to all the people that were affected and involved at the time. And those lessons take decades, if I'm honest. And I consider myself, one of the lucky ones in that post that particular incident, there wasn't any other extreme examples of psychosis that followed. And so being able to talk about it and help perhaps destigmatize these sort of things is probably one of the reasons why I take comfort in sharing the story in the detail I do.
I'm glad you said that. And I guess, what I've seen from other people sharing stories is how cathartic it is and how it helps them, even though it might be a decade or two after their traumatic events. It still helps to piece together some part of themselves and help them become more, fill in the blank, whole, settled, at peace, more themselves by sharing the story. And that's why we do this here. That's why Kintsugi Heroes was born. And so it's great to hear you actually reflect that as you're part of your own personal integration. And with regards to going to the hospital, what was that like for you? And how did it change, I guess, the other normal part of life? Because you're at university and you've obviously got family back, some in another state. What happened there?
It was a really bizarre experience. And I think one is just the environment. You're in this hospital. It's not quite like a normal hospital. There's plastic cutlery. You're really strictly scrutinized with your behavior and sort of what you do and don't do. And environmentally, it's really bizarre. And then I guess coloured against that was my own mental health and wellness in those immediate preceding days, because I didn't know where I was for that first week. My poor mother flew from Victoria over to Western Australia in that first week to see me. And because I was so unwell, I couldn't register. It was her, and I was tearing the wallpaper off the walls and talking about all sorts of nonsensical things. And for her to see that would have been extremely confronting and something that, I sought to make amends for further on. But yeah, a really weird experience, and in some ways unfortunate that social media hadn't really started then, because the fallout from all these things going wrong could have been much worse. And I guess the other interesting thing about those initial few days, that the rest of my life, so my law degree, banking, my accommodation at the university, college, they're all put on ice and without much explanation, because for those first few weeks, I just wasn't fit to make any decisions around that, or take care of myself in that way.
So, once you finished at the hospital, then what was the next step for you? And how did you reintegrate back into the life that was on hold?
Into the real world, I guess it was a much more protracted process than those initial few months. But I think one of the things I learned from that time is that something was very wrong, and that there was supports and systems available to try and help redress that. And so post hospital, one of the things I was told sort of straight up was the biggest thing that leads to events like this reoccurring is non-compliance with medication. And so I was always very studious at school. I'm like, got it. I don't want that ever to happen again. And in terms of taking medication and then finding the right medication combination, I was very compliant and willing to go on the journey with both. Law, I tried returning to a couple of times. I postponed it, and then the following year went and tried studying law at a local university in Victoria, and lasted a semester. I still wasn't fully recovered from the experience. And the way I describe it is, say you broke your leg, there's a fairly staggered and sequential process for recovery, rehabilitation, and a fairly easy to estimate timeline of how long it is until you can walk again. With my mental health, we weren't sure how it happened, why it happened. We didn't know what medication could be used to help mitigate the symptoms of the illness. And we had to figure all that out over a multi-year journey. And so um, it wasn't until a couple of years later that we found the right medicine combination that I was able to really step it up and start functioning sort of what my idea of a normal human was again. And a lot of trial and error, a lot of false starts. I did a lot of temporary jobs. I lost the job because the information about what happened at that time was released mistakenly. It was a really hard experience, and probably coloring all of that was becoming comfortable with it myself, and more importantly, being comfortable navigating life and explaining my absence, with employers and friends and family.
Well, so how long would you say your absence lasted for, in terms of from everyday life?
Yeah, I'd say probably 18 months, because there was sort of this extreme drop off. And then it would probably took about another, 6 to 12 months to get things on track. And my family at the time, were a small unit. We're all incredibly supportive. I've got a younger sister, and for a little while there, I had to share a bedroom with my teenage sister because mum's apartment was too small to handle us, and I wasn't ready to move out by any stretch. And then, learning to sort of do basic adult things again, like maintain a bank account, pay your bills, earn enough money to be able to rent or live on your own. And I felt like I had got those skills in check by the time I'd got to university. And then it was a hard reset, because just learning to function and piece together how to manage my mental health after that big event was a work in progress. And if we fast forward to that 18 months later, I think we'd found the right medication combination. By then, I was living on my own. And I think there was a part of me that goes, this is what it was like a bit before. I'm not quite the same, but I think I've got my wits and everything about me that I can continue to grow from here. And so that's what I did.
Wow, 18 months. It's a long time. Yet, do you feel that you came through and you were able to then redefine who you were, or were you trying to capture who you were before and bring the same Luke to the world as before?
Yeah, it's a really insightful question you've asked there, Evelyn, because I think for a very long time, I was trying to recapture the old Luke pre this incident. And I moved through life in a way that talked to and pointed to the ideas of navigating life how I did before. And I think it wasn't until I'd good 12 or 15 years later where I started re-looking at things. The coping behaviours that I was carrying going into Western Australia were there afterwards as well. And those coping behaviours are very understandable, but it took much longer to realise that they didn't serve me. And I think the drinking was a way to numb what happened, using other substances to help build rapport with other people who maybe had some trauma. And then I really threw myself into work as well, riding a bit of that manic energy that I may have had earlier. And all those things needed a reinvestigation later when I was at the point to be comfortable with my own recovery that I could say, this no longer serves me. And I can look at, the time I spent and the growth I went on, say 10 years after that event and look at it with fond memories, but also look at it today and go, I can understand the man who, worked late hours and overperformed and sought to people please wherever he could to be the social life of the party. I've now made peace with that journey and taken the lessons from it that I've got today and can look at it and go, okay, that was a challenge that I had to navigate. I can understand why that challenge presented itself. I'm grateful it happened, but I don't have to live my life that way anymore. And so the life I live today, I'm 2.5 years sober. I, don't feel the need to pursue or chase or people please. And I would add that the trauma that was building up and leading up to that detonation in Perth, instead of it being hidden or numbed, has been rigorously investigated and owned and worked through, with the help of, peer support and therapy and a lot of self-awareness and self-reflection, as well as relying on something that's bigger than me.
Sorry for the interruption. This is Ian Westmoreland, the founder of Kintsugi Heroes, and thank you for listening to this story from one of our amazing heroes. Our mission is for these stories to provide hope and inspiration to people experiencing life challenges, and to also educate the broader community on how best to provide support. If you would like to help us to continue to produce more hero stories and cover more adversity themes, we would welcome all donations. These can be made via our website, kintsugiheroes.com.au. The donate function is at the bottom of the homepage. We'd also welcome any feedback. You can email me direct using ian@kintsugiheroes.com.au. Now let's get back to the story.
Sounds like you've certainly, had a lot to do and work with over the journey since you, I suppose, came out of the hospital and found a way to reinvent, and yourself and find out who you want Luke Marshall to be. You mentioned alcohol a few times and being the life of the party. Was that part of the persona of Luke? Was that you in your teens, in your early 20s? Was that you?
Yeah, 100%. I think in that late high school, I segued from the school I was originally at to a scholarship to a new school and went through a mini reinvention that also involved introducing alcohol and being that life of the party. And post the event and the hospitalization, I think that behavior carried through. And I think one of the ways I could uh, prevent or prevent in talking marks uncomfortable questions about what happened or who I was to be the entertainer and to overperform and be extremely social and be very likable. And I think I can say some of these things with insight and not necessarily in a derogative way. I think these traits helped me survive and get through some really challenging experiences. But now I can look at some of them that push to excess and realize I'm comfortable with who I am. I can be kind and social without the need to redline it and be really comfortable with who I am and maintain balance. And so I do think the way I was sort of indulging for right or wrong helped get me through some challenging times. But now where I am today, it doesn't serve. And for the foreseeable future, I don't see it coming back because there's just no longer a need there. And I think my comfort and love for who I am transcends any need to sort of please others or numb what's already inside here and good.
That's really beautiful, Luke. You mentioned trauma, that you were numbing, you were hiding from yourself. Was that just part of childhood? Can I ask, was that sort of a build up, or was it an unknown thing that you just weren't really aware of?
It definitely stemmed from childhood, and I would say it was unknown to me, or perhaps the impacts that trauma had until much later, or that I could be comfortable with myself enough to create the honesty I needed to look at that. I mentioned my father, died when I was 4. He had his challenges, with drugs and alcohol, and from a regional town, and committed suicide when I was that age. And through a lot of digging and trauma work and with the right supports, I was able to find my story in that, which did involve being the one on the scene when Dad was found and navigating that. And I think that memory or feeling of the memory was buried for a very long time. And I remember sitting in the room with a therapist that I really, really appreciated, and she held the space, and I was going through, I can't remember, it just keeps popping up, but can't remember. And the therapist at the time asked, "Can you remember what it felt like at the time?" I can still feel it today. It was liquid terror. I just felt absolutely terrified and frightened out of my mind and didn't know what was going on. And being honest about the feelings that little Luke had was a really strong turning point in my recovery and owning my story and helping piece together what happened later and making peace with it, because I believe that incident and the knock-on impacts of navigating childhood after that and the decisions that were made post were definitely the building blocks that led to that really scary incident in Perth and the numbing behavior that I indulged in post, because that trauma wasn't visited, looked at, and healed. And when I think about that today and think about what little Luke went through, I always come from the perspective of, okay, well, what does he need today to feel supported and loved, and to know that he's not alone and that there's other parts and other people out there looking out for him and will continue to do so no matter what. And I think part of my healing journey has been just whenever I feel that feeling that was, very present back then, or something that's internal that I think my inner child needs, I just tell myself, I'm here for you no matter what. And that is an unassailable vow. It goes deeper than anything I can explain. And I guess people that knew Social Party Luke and met him as an adult, they sort of ask, would you ever go back to drinking? And it's really hard to convey just how strong that vow is to myself, and just how much little Luke needs me to look after myself today. You can't answer that in a sentence. So hopefully I did a better job of explaining it then. Yeah.
I think you did brilliantly well. I fully felt exactly what you meant, or at least I felt it deep within me. It made perfect sense. And we all have the little child's versions of ourselves, whether we have acknowledged that or not. And we also, what your story has shown is how powerful a childhood trauma can be in framing, colouring, filtering, and directing our life when it's not healed or being made aware or present at the time, or back when. So yes, it's a really powerful story. What I was going to ask you, what was the turning point of your healing? And you kind of said that just then. It was when you had the realization of the memory, and you got that. How did it make you feel after you had that moment with the therapist and you had that recollection?
Yeah, piecing together something that happened over multiple decades and saw ups and downs and sort of extreme incidents. The way I think about it and feel about it is lots of pieces of a jigsaw that were getting put back together and then getting blown up again. And it was sort of trial and error to get that complete picture. And after that, I guess, turning point with the therapist and that part clicking into place, I'd never felt more connected to who I am and my true self than I did then. It was a really illuminating moment in that things clicked, and that I no longer felt that I needed to pretend to be something I'm not, and that this power or sense of self that was inside me was much, much stronger than I'd ever given credit before. And to be able to connect with that and let it inform my understanding of my past and history, but also that it can inform my future. It was a really grounding and calming moment for me. And I'd say that feeling's never gone away. And if not, I'd say it's probably gotten stronger over time as I honor it and treasure it and continue to look after myself and lead a good life.
And I love the joy and the optimism with which you smile as you said that. It's so powerful. I can feel it. It's awesome. What have been the most pivotal elements of the journey out, as in the healing and the recovery? What has helped you the most what's helped you get to where you are today?
The most obvious ones to me that have helped recovery and the journey would be my family, first and foremost, the immediate actions of my mother and sisters in particular. It's irreplaceable. The journey for them at that pointy end was in many ways much more tumultuous and hard on them because they were aware. And I'm forever grateful for what they did in helping assist in getting me back on my feet. I would say for all its challenges and flaws, and I've experienced those too, the medical system did what it needed to in terms of at least helping prevent something really bad happening again. And I had a good range of psychiatrists and psychologists and peer support workers along the way that helped navigate that recovery. I'd say my friends, the ones that have stood the test of time, and I have a good amount of them, have been extremely supportive and sometimes have been better at saying what happened to me than what I could at the time. Oh, so you're unwell. And I was like, well, I can just say that. Like, I thought that I have to share all this other, shame and all this story. No, you were just unwell, Luke. Let it go. And so that's been really gratifying for me over time. And then later, I'd say recovery circles. I identify with a 12-step that helps address childhood trauma, and being able to share that experience in the safety of a room with people who've come from, other challenging backgrounds has been a step change for me in sort of how I look at my story and get comfortable with who I am, and will continue for years to come.
It sounds like you've had an amazing amount of support. Obviously, you needed the support, started off at the hospital and then it continued from there. How pivotal was it to have the love and support of your mum and your sisters, especially in those early days?
I don't think I'd be alive today if it wasn't for that. And mum mortgaged her home. She gave me her room. My other sister was so fiercely protective of looking after me, despite being younger, that she was shouting people down and cutting them off even when I was in the wrong. Like, I just love them to bits for that. And we've grown up with our challenges, but you can't take that stuff back. I'm so lucky. And, I've been around other peers who perhaps don't have that level of support or have more strained relationships with their family. And I feel for them because without that, it's very easy to slip back through the cracks again. And so, that's like, that love is irreplaceable, and I'm so grateful that I got that at the time and get that from them today.
That's so beautiful. How has this whole journey of what you've shared with me today, how has that shaped who you are today and how you serve the world, as in what you do as a career, vocation, how you live? It'd be great to get some perspective on that and hear about the impact on you.
It's definitely informed everything I do and how I live as an adult. And I think there was a long period of getting comfortable with owning my story. 10 years after the hospitalization, I sought to do that and wrote a book. I self-published a book about my experiences. And at the time, it was extremely cathartic. I really, enjoyed writing about that and my experience in sort of navigating such an incident. And then I'd say how it informs, 10 years later again, today is from a perspective of service. So I've had a relatively successful marketing career, and now I'm sort of more focused on how can we assist the not-for-profits? How can we use tech for good? How can I give service with the spare time I have and help others who are right in it right now. And I look at it now and go, wow, look how far I've come and how fortunate I am to be where I am today. I get an opportunity to help lift others up, and I see it with the people I sort of connect with and help. And it might be, just a kind word incidentally along the way, but I'm always consistently surprised by sort of bits of feedback that get back to me later about, oh, I heard your story and this, or thanks for that it just happens. And as I look to the future, I've got a partner now, a new partner in the last year, and we've got, twin boys on the way in April. And I can't believe it, because that chance to give fatherhood and to two boys, and it's something that I missed out on. I'm smart. Like, I can't even convey the emotion that comes around that. So I couldn't be more pumped.
I'm so happy for you, Luke. Congratulations. Wow. And that'll be the start of another, exciting chapter of your life. And I can only imagine what kind of parent you're going to be, right? Given what you've been through. It's just going to be beautiful. I know it already. I can foresee the future. And, well done. Well done on the journey and doing the work. It clearly has not been easy for you. It never is, right? The most rewarding journeys are never easy.
Yeah, 100%. I am a big fan of taking what works for you, noticing it, and then moving on and continuing to grow. And I think in my younger years, I'd be very focused on those external markers for growth, and I'm not about that anymore these days. I think the only person that I can hold to account is what's going on the inside. And so if I'm acting from a place that's centered, calm, comes from a perspective of service and humility and love for myself, the rest takes care of itself. And wherever that goes, I'm sure it'll be delightful, challenging, engaging, but ultimately the most rewarding for me.
Absolutely, it will. And look, as a fellow parent of twin boys, if you ever need a piece of advice, you're welcome to reach out and ask me. Okay, I'm here.
I think it's not the first time I've heard this, Aveline. I think there's like a twin parent code where you have to help incoming parent twins, because there's definitely been a lot of unsolicited offers for help.
Yeah, you'll find in some of those moments after they arrive, you'll be like thinking, okay, which of those offers do I need to take advantage of right now? Because it's uncharted territory, shall I say.
Fantastic. Look forward to it.
Yeah, that's right. As we come to the end, Luke, first of all, thank you. I just want to know, my last question for you is, if there's someone listening to this who can resonate with any part of your story, who might be going through any of these challenges, whether it's the mental health, the trauma, psychosis, anything that they can relate to, because there's quite a few things in your story, is there something you'd like to say to them?
Yeah, if you've gone through some of that, or it's resonating with you, I just want to say you're enough. You've done enough. You are loved. And that if you follow that thread and can feel that love even in your darkest moments, it's going to help you. And notice that any feeling is temporary, but the need and desire to love and give back is in everyone. And I think if you can write it out, the benefit and the tangible, it gets so much better. I've been in that darkness, and I'm here to tell you it gets so much better. So please stick it out for us.
That's really powerful and very loving. Thank you, Luke. I want to just again, thank you for sharing, being so vulnerable and open and giving of yourself today. I know that it's going to touch hearts and minds, and, provide inspiration and hope for those who are listening and watching. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me today.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Kintsugi Heroes. Please like and share the show to your friends so we can get this out to even more people. If you have a story you'd like to share with us, please reach out using the contact details below. And join us next week for our next hero's story. Until then, keep being you, and remember that we are all heroes in our own unique way.
Only when it's broken. Only when it's broken. When it hits you in the middle of the night and the truth burns so bright. Only when it's broken. Only when it's broken. Take pride in those cries. It's only for tonight, and then you rise. Only when you're broken. Only when you're broken. Only